Let's say you want to plan an image that includes the moon and you would like the moon to be of a certain size relative to your subject. Do you know how to figure out where you would need to be and set up your camera in order to make an image like that? PhotoPills has a tool to help you figure that out, and I'll show you how to use it right after this. Hey there, photographers. Brenda Petrella here, and welcome to another episode of PhotoPills Friday, where we unlock the power of the PhotoPills app without all the confusion. In this week's episode, we're going to learn how to use the Sun and Moon map tool available inside the map settings of the planner. And I'm going to show you how to use it to plan a moon image, but it's used in the same way to plan a sun image. When you're planning a moon composition and you want to include a subject in the scene and not just the moon by itself, then an important question to ask is, how big or how small do you want the moon to appear relative to that subject? Now, this may seem counterintuitive at first, but there's really only one thing that determines how big the moon will appear in an image as compared to your subject, and that is the distance between you and the subject. So let me explain how this works because it will help us understand the map tool better. You may have noticed that the moon often looks larger when at the horizon, and this is called the moon illusion. And scientists are still trying to agree on how to explain this effect. The moon actually does not change size regardless of where it is in the sky, unless, it's a time when the moon is actually orbiting closer to the Earth or supermoon, in which case the moon is slightly larger than normal in the sky by usually 10 to 15%. The same illusion of the moon size at the horizon holds true when you include a subject in your moon composition. So the closer you are to the subject, the smaller the moon will appear as compared to the subject, and the farther you are away from the subject, the larger the moon will appear relative to the subject. The moon appearing bigger or smaller in a given image can be partly explained by what's called the Ebbinghaus illusion, which is basically an optical illusion of relative size perception. Now, let's just look at a quick example. Here we have an orange circle. If we surround it with a bunch of large gray circles, the orange circle appears small. Now, let's take that same orange circle and surround it with a bunch of little gray circles. Now, the orange circle appears large. The orange circle is actually the same size in the two scenarios, but our brains perceive its size as relative to the gray circles, and that's what makes the orange circle appear to change in size. So let's for a moment consider that the orange circle represents the moon and the gray circles represent our subject in the composition. As with any image, the closer you are to your subject, the larger it will appear in the frame. So the large gray circles basically represent what our subject would look like if we were close to it. And the small gray circles would represent what our subject would look like if we were farther away from it. We can't change our distance to the moon, but we can change our distance to our subject. And we can use this to our advantage if we want to create an image where the moon appears to be very large relative to our subject. We just need to aim for the scenario where we are far enough away from the subject so that the moon appears to be large as compared to that subject. With these concepts in mind, now let's look at a potential composition and see how PhotoPills can actually help us figure out our shooting location. For this example, I'm going to use a composition of the full moon in Iceland, where the full moon is rising between the mountain and large sea rocks at Reynisdrangar. Not sure if I'm saying that right, which is near Vik, and many of you may already be familiar with this popular photo spot. I used Google Earth to scope out the area around Reynisdrangar and looked for potential shooting locations. Because the moon rises in the east, I would need to be west of the rocks in order to get an image of the moon rising at this location. And after looking at the map, there are a couple of different options of accessible places to set up my camera, so that bodes well. And while in Google Earth, I also measured the distance between the cliffs and the nearest sea rock to get an idea of how big I would want the moon to be for this composition. The distance is about 80 to 90 meters. So if I want the diameter of the moon to be about a third of that space, then the apparent moon size should be around 25 to 30 meters in diameter. Now let's dive into the PhotoPills planner and see how we can figure out where we need to be in order to get the moon to appear to be a certain size in our composition. To find this location in the planner, hit load at the bottom of the screen and type in Reynisdrangar. This puts the red pin on the black beach next to the cliffs and rock formations at Reynistrangar. Next, go to the second panel of the top bar, which is the pin-to-pin geodetic panel, and click on it to activate the black pin. I'm now going to zoom in and put the black pin right where I would like the moon to be between the cliffs and the rocks. Now zoom way out and go activate the map settings in the lower right corner of the map and click on Sun and Moon Map Tool all the way to the right under Map Tools and click Done. Now you should see a gray circumference or circle surrounding the black pin on the map. And a few extra icons are also listed at the top under the top bar. The gray circle is a visual representation of where you will need to place your red pin in order to give you the moon size that you want. So let's see how this works after we go over some of these icons at the top. The little moon on the left is how you would toggle between the sun and moon aspects of this particular tool. And we're going to keep it on moon for this example. The next icon looks like a double-headed arrow, and this is where you can set the moon size. So from our research, we found that we want the moon size to be around 20 to 30 meters. And if I type in 30 meters and click Done, now the gray circle is showing all the potential shooting locations around the black pin that could give me this result. So now I can go ahead and move my red pin, which is my shooting location, to anywhere on this circle where we would get the view of the composition we want to get the moon of the right size. So let's zoom in and see what our options are for shooting locations along this gray circle. And this looks great. Right near the gray circle is a parking lot for another popular tourist spot, so I know this area will be accessible. So I'm going to place the red pin on the circle for now. What I could do next is hop back over to Google Earth and see whether the view from this location where the red pin is fits the composition that I have in mind. Now you can also use the Sun and Map tool if you want to calculate the size of the moon if you already know what your shooting distance is. So for example, there might not be a lot of options of where you can shoot from due to lack of accessibility or other objects being in the way. And so if you already know your shooting distance, you can enter it here under the third icon at the top, and PhotoPills will automatically calculate the relative size of the moon from that distance to your subject, so you can see whether or not the composition would be what you imagined or not. Okay, so now that we've figured out our shooting distance, the next steps in planning would be to figure out what the azimuth and elevation of the moon needs to be in order to rise between the cliffs and the sea rocks, and the exact location of the red pin for this shot, and the date and time of when this event would occur. And I go over all of the step-by-step process of how to do that in episode 5 using a different example, so I won't repeat those steps here, but I have included a link in the description below for this particular plan if you would like to download it and make sure you understand these concepts. At this point in planning, you may also be interested in figuring out what your field of view should be and what focal length to use to get the shot from this location, and you can check out episode 6 to learn about how to do that with PhotoPills. So if you've been following along with PhotoPills Friday episodes in chronological order, you should now have a solid foundation and hopefully a decent comfort level with how to navigate and use the app for planning images. So big congratulations for making it this far. Most people struggle and give up, and you didn't, so thank you for sticking with me. In the next several episodes of PhotoPills Friday, we're going to take a little break from the long-form videos and instead focus on some quick tips and little hidden tricks inside the app. So subscribe if you want to keep learning, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.